Hello, welcome back, fellow page sewers, and welcome to the weekly update. It's where I talk about what I've been reading, what I'm going to read, what I won't get to, and lots of things in between. If you'd like to connect with me, the best place is on our website at pagesewing.com. We have blog articles, reviews, lots of other fun stuff going on there, so go check that out and say hello there. So this is where I usually start with what I was reading this week. I didn't get a ton of reading this week, mostly because I was waiting to decide on the next book that I'll be reading after Negative Space. But I wanted to finish the discussion before I picked another book and started moving on. So this week I was, we finished Negative Space, and I was finishing the last couple chapters that we had for, the chapters for this week for House of Chains by Stephen Erickson. It's the fourth book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And I really like this book. It's probably my favorite. It is my favorite Malazan book that I've read. I've read the first 5, and this by far is my favorite. It has a more singular focus. It has a main character. We don't do a whole lot of head hopping around. We have a very specific character arc, at least so far. I don't remember I know the entire book when we start to, it opens up a little bit, but I really like the focus of Karsa, and that's not a spoiler. It's just there's a character we focus on, and it's much easier for me to follow along because we're not jumping around to 30 different characters and start to lose track. So really enjoying that one quite a bit. And so this week, I'll be finishing the next couple chapters of House of Chains and also starting The Outer Dark. So anyone who would like to read along, we haven't decided on a day yet to have like a target. The book is only 256 pages, and I've been wanting to read this for a while. It's been on my list. I've been talking about it. So I want to finish that before I move on to something else, just to kind of get the slate of McCarthy books out of the way. I still want to continue with McCarthy, but I think we need a little bit of a break and read a few other things. And I'll get into that here in a minute. What else I want to get to. Some books I hadn't really known about or been familiar with have gotten into my radar. So I'll talk about that here in a minute. I usually like to talk about a comic book that I've read this week, or like my pick of the week. And this week was The Savage Sword of Conan Reforged. This one, so I was at the comic book store and just kind of browsing around, driving around, and I stopped by. I saw this on the shelf. I've never been a big Conan fan. I remember way back in my childhood, I had a few of those really oversized magazine style Conan books, and I don't remember really reading them too much. I think I just looked at them more for the art. I never really get into the stories. And so when I saw it on the shelf, Jared, my co-host for Panel Chewing for a weekly comic book show, he just loves Conan and raves about the Conan books. And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I ended up really liking it. They're short stories by Robert E. Howard that they reprinted, but in color. These are originally adapted from his short stories in black and white, and now they republished them in color. I didn't know that when I picked up the book, but I think they did a pretty good job going from black and white to color and not losing a ton of detail, because if you draw something in black and white, you are being very specific with, you use certain lines to accentuate things for your foreground and background and shadows and light sources and detail and everything. So to add color to that isn't always easy. And I think they did a pretty good job converting these to color. I didn't really care that it was in color or not. I really liked the artwork anyway. But some really well-known artists did this way back in, I'm not even sure when, a long time ago. And now they're reprinted in color, I'm guessing to appeal to a wider audience, people who, maybe prefer color in their books. And there's 2 stories in this book, and it's a big oversized kind of magazine style uh, format. I think it's about 50 to 60 pages long. And the first story was the Frost Giant's Daughter, which was fine. I thought it was okay. It was a good story, but the second story was Tower of the Elephant, and this one kind of ruined my day in a in a because it was so effective. Was not what I expected. It's a story about a tower that supposedly has these amazing riches at the top of the tower, and you have to thieves are always trying to get in to steal the loot, and Conan ends up going up and trying to get into the tower, and what he finds is it really took me by surprise. It was a very just heart wrenching story, and really got to me. So I was really just hooked on this book after that. So I plan to keep reading more Conan books. I'm going to try to stick with ones that were written by Robert E. Howard. I know there's other stories that have been created for Conan after that. But I'm going to try and stick to stories that came from Howard, just because that's kind of where I want to focus on for now, and then eventually spread my wings to other things. So this week, I will be talking about what I was watching. This week we are discussing Gandhi. It's the 1983 Oscar Best Picture winner. I've never seen Gandhi, but it's a long ass movie. It's a long movie, and I guess I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's funny because in the 80s had kind of this, those of you who remember the 80s, I vaguely remember some of it. I was young for a lot of it, but there was a crime wave in the 80s. There was, a lot of things going on in the 80s that weren't always pleasant. And it's weird to see the Best Picture winners of the 80s and how they changed from previous decades, because previous decades, the Best Picture winners were usually movies that were popular, or movies that were, movies that people went to go see. And it feels like this is the break where the Oscar winners weren't what was popular. There were more movies specifically made for that purpose, for awards, kind of to appeal to award members, or to whoever picked the winners. And it's funny seeing the list of Best Picture winners for the 80s versus previous decades, and how it changed, because we had movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T. and these other movies that everyone talks about, but they were nominated, but they didn't win. And movies like Gandhi or Ordinary People or Chariots of Fire did win. So it's a break from kind of what had happened before previous decades. I just think it's interesting to look at those things, to compare what was being watched to what was popular versus what was winning awards. And it seems like this is where things changed. It's interesting going from year to year for the Oscars, and to watch every Best Picture winner and have that context of from the 1960s all the way up until the 1980s, and how it changed, and how just to see that progression. It's very interesting. But also, I wanted to finish Negative Space before I moved on to a different book. I really want to finish my Berserk discussions, and I'm going to try and get something together for Berserk Volume 44. I've reread it, or 42, sorry. I've reread it, and I'm trying to get my thoughts together for some kind of just episode to discuss that volume before I move on to something else, even if I'm reposting older content that was on the comic book podcast that I'm moving over to this podcast. So I'm going to try and get that together. I'm also, I still haven't finished my Crossed article. I need to polish that up and to record that episode. I just haven't had a chance. That should be hopefully coming soon. I need to get my shit together on that. But yeah, so hopefully sometimes.
Your language is offensive.
I know, but hopefully sometime soon. So So it's funny because on our negative space discussion, we were discussing, this isn't a spoiler, we were discussing, well, Carl D. Albert, who I discussed negative space with, brought up Gnosticism. And I didn't really know much about it. I had heard it before, but I didn't know anything about it. We talked about Gnosticism during the discussion, and it got my brain moving on, I really want to know more about that. And he recommended a few books. And I thought, well, I really want to check that out. And the next day I was at the brewery finishing up the last chapter of House of Chains before our discussion. And there was someone at the brewery who was like, "Hey, what are you reading?" And I said, "Oh, I'm reading House of Chains." And they came over and we sat and talked for, I don't know, hours about books and Lovecraft and conspiracy theories. And what's funny is that I told him, he asked, "Well, what else are you reading?" And I said, I just finished Negative Space. And I kind of told him, it's kind of some of the things that we talked about, whereas Gnosticism, and his eyes lit up like, "Oh, Gnosticism, I'm into that." So we sat there and talked about Gnosticism and religion and all this other. It's funny the way that happens sometimes when you have this topic that you're curious about, and then you run into someone who knows a lot about it. So anyway, it's strange the way that happens. But shout out to Matt. Matt, if you're listening, thanks again for the chat, and hope you join us for one of our other read-alongs here soon. It was really interesting the way that the universe, sets that up for you. Sometimes I guess it just happens that way, but because of that discussion, because of that talk with Carl, and then I talked to Matt, so I had this, I wanted to learn more about Gnosticism, and I went to the used bookstore on yesterday, and I went looking for some books. There were some other books I wanted. I had a list. So I ended up getting a couple of books. I went and got, I ended up walking out with No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy, of course, another book I want to read eventually. I had a different copy of Blood Meridian because I lost my last one. And I want to reread that one at some point. And I also picked up Steppenwolf and Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Now, Hermann Hesse wrote Demian with an E, so Demian. This is the book that was recommended to me by Matt, who knows a lot about Gnosticism. So I went looking for Hermann Hesse books, ended up finding those other two books, and I started reading Steppenwolf. And I'm just a few pages in, but I was hooked already. And it's kind of this exploration of, the mind and life and everything else, and it really got my brain going on on kind of reading these kind of books. So, but I'll get to more of that into a minute. I'll get more into that in a second. I also picked up Those Who Hunt the Night by Barbara Hambly. This is a book that was recommended to me by C.S. Friedman. And I also found a copy of Northlanders Volume 1. This is a comic by Vertigo. This is 15 years old, but a really great comic book series about Vikings and kind of when their time was coming to an end, and the changes that were taking place, and their way of life was changing and their culture was changing. So it's a great book. I'm glad I found a copy of it. But, I went looking for some used stuff. I went looking to try and, support local businesses and trying to find, of course, some deals on some books,
I'm broke as shit.
So I tried to find some these buttons are way too fun. I was trying to find some books to get some deals on or whatever. And I also really found that I'm enjoying physical books a lot more than reading digitally. I've been finding that to be true a lot because I like to tab the pages and all that stuff. So I went to the used bookstore. I got with all my trade credit. I think with all those books, I dropped like $20, and I ended up walking out with a stack of books that I really wanted. I thought, well, the rest of the books on my list, I'll go to like Barnes and Noble, see what I can find. So I went to Barnes and Noble, went looking around, found the books I wanted. I wanted to get a copy of Borges, of his short stories. I wanted to get possibly Lonesome Dove by, I forget the author's name, McCurdy. I wanted to get But also, I was looking for The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And there was another one I was looking for that I really wanted to pick up. But I went to the bookstore, to Barnes and Noble, and the place is packed. There's tons of people there. And, the walking around and looking at the books, and the book, the Borges short stories that I found when I looked at the book was like $30, right? And it seemed a little high. It seemed a little expensive. So I just pulled my phone out, looked it up on Amazon, and on Amazon it's like $14. So it's tough because I want to support local businesses. I want to support, businesses in here, to keep them running. But when I can get it for half price and it'll be delivered to my door in 2 days or in a day sometimes, it's a tough sell. It's tough because if I bought all the books I wanted at Barnes and Noble, I'd be spending double what I would just spend on Amazon, and it's delivered to my door in a couple of days. And I don't have to deal with the crowds or with anything else. I just a few clicks and it's on its way. So it's tough because I hate not going to local businesses, but it's just, I'm saving a whole lot of money. So when, that's why I try to go to, the used book. There's a used bookstore really close to me. So I try to go there. They know me already. So it's nice to go there. It's not always easy finding things because they don't have an index. They don't have a log of all the books they have. They just go by memory. But, I'm trying to get more into physical media, trying to buy more stuff. So because I'm trying to get more into physical media, I also went to a used record store where they sell used records and CDs and movies and stuff. And I went there and I thought, well, I'll buy a couple used CDs, some CDs I've been wanting. But I walk in there and used CDs that are, I would say, slightly used. I mean, you can tell that they're not new. Like you could tell that, they have scratches on the case and stuff. They're $15. They're $12 to $15 for a used CD that, and you can't even look at the CD until you buy the actual, you have to get the case, bring it up, and they put the CD in the case for you. But even then, I'm dropping, let's say the CD is in perfect condition. It's just the case that's, scratched or a little bit beat up. I'm spending $12 to $15 when, again, I got on Amazon and got the CD that I wanted for $10, brand new, delivered to my door in a couple of days. And it's like, well, and there's tons of people in there. It's hard to get around because the aisles are really, really narrow. So it's a pain in the ass to do anything in there because it's so small. So by the time I found what I was looking for, it's like, okay, this used CD is $15, but I can get it for $10 on Amazon. It's just, it's a tough sell. And look, I know they have overhead. I know they have employees. They have to pay their bills, and I get it. But you have to give me some kind of incentive to go there. And if you had an incentive, if even matched Amazon, I'd be happy with it. But when I want to get 2 or 3 CDs and I'm paying almost double what I would just getting online and a few clicks away, it's tough. Do you experience this too? Is this something that you've noticed when you go out places and trying to buy whatever it is that you're looking for, whether it be CDs, records, movies, books? Because the used bookstore, I go in there and there's, the cover price of a book is $12, $13. And it's usually $6 to $8. And I'm cool with that. Even like the Blood Meridian copy I have, cover was beat up. There was a crease in the cover. And if you know me, I hate when books are damaged, but I'm starting to come around to that. I'm starting to be more accepting of the book is loved and all that stuff. I don't know. I'm trying to get used to it. I can be very particular about how the book looks, but anyway, the point I'm making is like, I accept the fact that there's a crease in the cover, a small crease in the corner. I don't mind it. I'm supporting a local business. I'm saving myself a few bucks. Then I'm okay with it. But it's tough. Like, give me an incentive to go there. It's just, it's hard when it's so convenient and it's so fast and easy, and it's less expensive. It's a crazy time we live in right now. It's also funny to think that, a lot of people say, well, why buy the CD or vinyl when I can listen to the record on Amazon or on YouTube for free? I just pop out, open YouTube and listen to it there. I guess it's the experience of having the disc, of having the liner notes, of physically holding it, of putting it in the player and being deliberate with what you're listening to or what you're watching, and having that experience of, I'm a big fan of listening to a record and having a record listened from start to finish and having that experience. Because before the days of everything was a single, you had kind of records that they were very particular. They were very careful about how they structured the record, the order of the songs, and it was like a journey of of these songs, and it took you from one place to another. And we've kind of lost that, and that makes me sad. But maybe I'm just, maybe I need to chase the kids off my lawn. But I miss that. I miss that experience, and I'm trying to be more deliberate and more, kind of having the material. And it's funny because if those of you who remember the Napster days when people were downloading music, well, they still download music, but then it was different. Anybody could do it. Now it takes a little bit more effort. But back in the day, with Napster, everybody lost their minds. But now, because it's on YouTube, nobody cares. I think it's interesting that back then, even now, they still prosecute people for illegally downloading content. And if you can listen to it on YouTube, it's okay. And YouTube's getting the ad revenue, and the artist very rarely gets anything. If you're listening to somebody's music on Spotify, they're making fractions of a penny. They make nothing on Spotify. Spotify makes a ton of money, and the artist makes next to nothing. So I think it's funny that there's this middleman now, these companies in the middle who sometimes we pay to access, and they make the money, but the artist doesn't make the money. So going through this physical media kind of kick I've been on, maybe kind of consider all those things and how interesting that is, that there's a middleman. Before it was a consumer, now it's a company who is like who tells us what we can and can't listen to, and they make the revenue. The artist still doesn't. The artist at the other end still doesn't make anything. So that's all very interesting. This all brings me to the point that I wanted to bring up is, I'm not sure if I've talked about this or not, but when I expire, I don't want a funeral. I don't want, any like a traditional funeral. I've never wanted that. What I've always wanted is to have like a CD or a playlist of 45 minutes to an hour long of music that tells a story, and that kind of is my soundtrack to my life. And I've been working on that for a long time. It's been in my head for a long time. But I wanted, just everyone who goes to my ceremony or whatever you want to call it, my party, just shut up and listen for 45 minutes instead of sitting through, something else. Just sit there and listen. And then afterwards, I want like kegs and a party, and I just want everyone to have a good time and have, just have a good time, have a party after, and just have other songs being played that would just be whatever, and just have a good time. But the funeral playlist I've been working on for a long time, and I wonder, am I the only one? Have any of you thought about that before? And I would like to know about it. If you do have a playlist, send it to me. I'll try and start a thread. I believe we already have a thread on the forum about this, but I'm going to post my playlist. I'm going to try and finish it, because you never know, and I'll have my playlist. So if anything ever happens to me, make sure that whoever is organizing my funeral, probably my mom, that this playlist gets played. I'm counting on you, dear listeners, to make sure that this happens. But anyway, I know it's kind of a somber note to end on, but it's something I've been thinking about for a long time. And next week I will have my playlist finished. It's holding myself accountable. But and I've also been wondering, because I've been, the Herman Hesse stuff, the Gnosticism, I've been looking into Carl Jung. I've been looking into other authors that, you know, have this have a way of making you think and really stick with you. Even McCarthy. McCarthy has ways to get into your head and stories stick with you. They can be very impactful stories. And I'm starting to wonder, because I read fantasy for a long time, almost exclusively fantasy. And look, I'm not trying to badmouth fantasy. It's a great genre. There's some really great books in fantasy. Some of my favorite books are fantasy books. I mean, my favorite series is The Second Apocalypse. I mean, so yeah, fantasy can be impactful. It can be transformative. It can change, in some ways, change your life, because The Second Apocalypse changed mine. But I wondered, so much fantasy is so much, it's so similar, and there's so much fantasy that is just, you read it, you enjoy it, and then you're on to the next one, and you kind of forget about it. And there's certain books that I remember that were really good and that I remember, and there's other ones that I read that I've already forgotten about. And sometimes I look at my list of books that I've read, and it's like, I forgot I read that. Like, there's nothing, even a series. Like, I've read some series that it's like, okay, I don't remember any of that. None of it really ever stuck with me. I completely forgot about it. So I wonder, was I wasting my time reading so much fantasy? Should I have mixed things up a little bit better and read more broadly and read different things and mixed things up? And maybe the fantasy felt so similar because I was reading so much of it back to back to back that it all kind of blended together. So what I'm getting at is that it's good to mix things up. It's good to read different things. And look, if you love a certain genre, I'm happy for you. For me personally, I'm just trying to mix things up a little bit and read things that are different and kind of challenge me and make me think. And not all of it will, but that's kind of what I'm looking for. So that's why I want to get into the Gnosticism and Carl Jung and some other authors that really kind of make you think and potentially can change the way that you live your life, or at least the way you see life. But anyway, that's enough for me for one day. So thank you for listening. This is for all the stuff I talked about, there will be links down below, because I am an Amazon affiliate now. And it sounds fancy. All that just means is that whenever anybody clicks the link and orders something, I get a few pennies from Amazon to help cover hosting costs and podcast costs and all that stuff, because it does cost, especially for the website. So if you'd like to support me, there's no cost to you. Just click the link, do your Amazon shopping, and Amazon throws me a few pennies. Jeff Bezos he throws me a few pennies, and it goes to the cost of the website and podcast. So I appreciate it, anybody who does that. But also, I wanted to mention I have had trouble sleeping, and I ended up, I'd fall asleep and then I'd wake up and just stare at the ceiling for hours and stare at my mind for hours and couldn't get out of my own head. So I found this stuff called Calm Sleep, and that's not a product. They aren't a sponsor or anything. It's just this product called Calm Sleep. It's by ZipFizz. Some of you may know what ZipFizz is. But anyway, I started drinking that. It's this mix you add with water, and it's completely knocked me out. And I've actually been getting a little bit of sleep. So any of you who have been having trouble sleeping, highly recommend this stuff. It is pretty good. It is a little pricey, but it is pretty good if you're losing sleep like I was. I'm still. So anyway, thank you again for listening. Really appreciate it. Let me know what you're reading this week if you'd like to let me know. Let me know what you're up to, how things are going. And what do you think about the funeral playlist, about reading more broadly? What are your thoughts on that? Physical media, buying used, all that kind of stuff. Or are you happy with just going digital? Let me know. So until next time, I hope everyone has a great week, and we will talk to everyone very, very soon.